Let's go. Another one?
Another one. You ready?
I feel like DJ Khaled right now.
I know, right? Ready
Yep.
for a fire conversation.
Let's go,
It's
man.
gonna get lit.
I actually really, I'm looking forward for this conversation.
Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. Well, welcome to the Soul Tapes podcast. My name is Adam Cruz.
And my name is Antonio Reyes.
Yes. And we are excited today. I'm excited, man. I'm excited to dive into this conversation about what it means to be a peacemaker.
Yep.
So, if anyone has done the Enneagram test, you would probably maybe surprised, maybe not be surprised to know that me and Antonio are peacemakers, Enneagram 9s. So
Let's go.
yeah. So, I don't know if that plays into the quality of our relationship and our friendship, but it definitely doesn't hurt. So
Yeah, true. We always look for like peace
Yes.
among if there's any conflict. We just
Yes.
try to work it out
yeah,
and
we're
stuff like that.
able to find a resolution and a
Yes.
solid ground. So
Yeah.
and one thing I love about personality tests and just things like the Enneagram is getting to learn not only more about yourself but also about others, right?
Yep.
But today I think it's going to be an interesting conversation diving into this idea of what is a peacemaker's role in 2020.
Yeah, because I think the reality is that putting our number to the side, right?
Yeah.
I think peacemaker is just such a needed characteristic right now, right? Because of where we live in the environment that we live in the atmosphere that we live in right now. Everything is so divisive. Everything is set up that way, right?
Yeah.
And even I was even listening to and I'm sure you watched the documentary, right? The social media dilemma.
Yeah.
And how the algorithms give you what you actually clicking on, and if you keep clicking into maybe hostility and all that stuff, they keep feeding you that instead of actually helping you not to be so narrow-minded, perhaps to say that, but I think right now, even in not just in our nation, but in our relationships, our family, in our marriages, in our relationship with our brothers, sisters, even in our relationship in people that come into to church, and because we have different ideologies, so I think this role of a peacemaker is such a needed right now, and we're gonna jump into it.
Yeah, and I think one thing that, as we were kind of processing and thinking about this conversation, I think it's important for us to, acknowledge the realities of what this year has looked like so far. I mean, we have experienced and had the chance to experience firsthand, this racial injustice, the racial tension that's going on, the political tension, which right now is probably at an all-time high. I mean, we're a couple weeks away from an election. And I think one thing I love about this podcast and why we even started this podcast and the name Soul Tapes Podcast is all intentional, because we want to talk about this role of a peacemaker in the midst of everything that's going on, and what does it look like for us to engage, and how can we operate as far as what does our role look like, what are the things that we can attribute, how should we be handling and our relationships and the conversations, and how should we be going about these things, right? So this is something that I know I process constantly because of who I am, because of the natural, innate ability within me to desire peace, right? And this is just in general when it comes to my personal life, relationships, friendships, but even more so now when you're talking about seeing these things going on in social media in our world, the desire to see peace in our world today, and the frustrations that come with how people are handling situations and all that. So, that's just kind of where we want to start this conversation.
The reality is that you and I can live where there's this, when there's not maybe a middle ground. Yeah. When there's tension, not necessarily tension, but when there's maybe divisiveness. Yeah. I'm uncomfortable, obviously, because of my nature, who I am. Yeah. Even if there's a problem with someone that I need to address, like, I can't wait 24 hours many times because I want to address it some way, somehow. But let's talk about this, because there's some misconception about being a peacemaker. Yeah. And we were talking about it, how many times we believe the peacemakers need to avoid, or they avoid conflict.
Yeah.
They avoid tension. They avoid the tough conversations. And yeah, perhaps that's the unhealthy part of someone who is a peacemaker.
Yeah.
But the reality is, no, a peacemaker is someone who actually jumps in, goes forward, and tries to tackle those difficult conversations to bring resolution and to bring peace at the end, right? So I think let's just get rid of the misconception of, no, peacemakers avoid conflict and problems, right?
Yeah.
And it's not true.
Yeah. I think that's where we're at a peacemaker at our weakest, or when we're failing to live within our strengths, where we're choosing to avoid those types of conversations and circumstances, versus what the actual ability of a peacemaker is to be able to bring harmony in the midst of tension. Now, don't be wrong, like you said, I'm the same exact way. The funny part is, like, when it's not even tension that has to do with me, it could be like two of my friends, and completely. I'm like, I feel so bad. I want this to get resolved. I feel tension, and it's the desire to find a resolution. And I think that's what's important. I mean, even the thought of having this conversation for me was tension and conflict, because I was like, man, like, I think it's important. I think we need to talk about what's going on, but I want to talk about it in the way of not just addressing what's the tensions, but what is the role that we play as people who are believers, and even people who may not believe in God, and that doesn't dictate their decision making. I think that's where, to me, this conversation is much needed, because I think the reality of what we've seen in 2020 is we've seen the world going through very difficult scenarios, very tough and hurtful and craziness, and people keep saying the world is falling apart and we don't know what's going to happen moving forward, and all these things, right? All the structures that we are used to breaking down because of the COVID and all of that, and we're trying to figure out what is our response to that. What does that look like for us to handle these conversations?
I think that's an important question, because let's address it from, like, if you believe in Jesus, right?
If
you have a relationship with Jesus. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mountain, he says, blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be called son of God. He doesn't call anyone, and all the Sermon on the Mountain, he doesn't call the ones who bring justice, or the ones who bring this, be called the son of God. We're called the son of God. But specifically in that there, in that sentence, that verse right there, is a very interesting thing, because obviously Jesus is relating, right, our ability to create peace to his personality and who he is, right? And the reality is this is, we're gonna mess up with some theology, and maybe you disagree with it too. It's okay. There's, in the Bible, there's obviously a lot of conflict and a lot of war. And obviously many times God sends people to fight certain battles, right? And I remember hearing this statement, and I actually do believe this statement. I believe God only goes to war to bring back peace. He only fights for peace. He will never go and attack someone just for the sake of attacking someone. He will go fight to bring it back to peace. And this is what we have to learn. Our role is that we need to get rid of our political agenda. We need to get rid of our own agenda. We have the necessity to have cultural intelligence and emotional intelligence to actually learn how to have conversations, so that we can bring it back to peace. Right. That doesn't mean that you're gonna agree with everything, but the bigger picture, you think holistically. You don't think just one side. And I think that's a role we have to take in conversations, that if we are in our jobs, and we find ourselves in church, and we find ourselves in conversations between family, among family, that our role should be, hey, let's create peace among this.
And I think that's where, a lot of what I've heard this past year with the conversations of how the church has kind of dropped the ball, right, we see the division amongst how to address certain topics, how if you're for something, well, that means you're against this. And if you say you want to love on them, then that means you're against, this group of people. And there's this whole, you can't be both. And, I was listening to another podcast and they were addressing this idea of nuance, right? And it could be difficult when we have these very difficult situations, conversations, whether it's about race or politics, and there's sometimes this thing called nuance in how we love people. And I think that's what, to me, one of the Bible verses that sticks in my mind when I think about how we address these situations and what it means to be a believer, and how to love people well, is that there's a scripture that says, while we were yet sinners, Jesus died.
Yes.
While we were yet in our sin, while we were broken, while we were in disagreement with God, while our life didn't agree with what God was asking of us, he still chose to sacrifice himself for us. And to me, that is if to me, this is where I've started to get a little more bold in saying, there's a lot of people that call themselves Christians and believers, but in my opinion, don't understand the gospel. Because if you truly said that you're a believer in Jesus and you truly understand the gospel message and you truly understand God's desire for your life, that means that what God is asking of us is to go on a journey with him, a relationship with him. And within that relationship, I don't know about you, but the best relationships I've had are the ones that are actually shifting and changing and causing me to grow. And they're causing me to take myself and look at my life and take myself outside of myself, and to view others and to be able to have impact in other people's lives, right?
We even had conversations about certain topics. You, myself, Gabby, Vanessa, that we disagree sometimes, I don't even remember what was the conversation, but I remember having this conversation. But that's not the problem. Is that if we embrace what we see in culture, right, where if you're not for me, you're against me, if that's such a divisive mentality. And when you say, obviously, the cross as the biggest example, of bringing reconciliation, right, between a perfect God, a God who's holy, and sinners and broken people and messed up people, right? That cross is an example that there's a possibility, for reconciliation. Like you said, people that call themselves Christians and they don't embrace this gospel this way, they have a misconception, and it's so sad.
And I think, the to me, where I feel like where a lot of times where we fail, and not just in our faith, but in our life in general, is we live, even with the ability to have as much information at our fingertips, I believe that we live and out of a lens of where our perspective and our beliefs are very misinformed or uneducated, So I think that what happens is that we grow up kind of like in this childlike mentality where we accept a very short piece of information as like the whole truth, right? So we understand, Christians to be a certain way based on a certain statement or based on one person's experience, right? But we don't have the full picture, full understanding of something, or we don't cause ourselves to educate ourselves into understanding something full enough in order to make an actual opinion on it, right? Our opinion is based on such limited information. And that's where I feel like a lot of times people tend to be more judgmental, tend to be more unloving and more selfish because they've made a decision based on a very limited form of information. It's like, I don't know if you know a little bit about how they do conduct surveys and how when they're doing research on things, the smaller the sample base is it's kind of it means that the information that you're getting is kind of less accurate, because it's like saying if we did a survey in this room of how many people loved Chick-fil-A. Well, if all 5 of us love Chick-fil-A and then we said, oh, that determines that Chick-fil-A is the best fast food restaurant in the world. Is that accurate?
Nope.
I mean, how accurate can that possibly be, right?
Yeah.
Because you're talking about 5 people versus the millions of people in LA alone, right? So we can see how the limited access to the limited information that we may have on a certain topic can cause us to make uninformed decisions or biases. So
yeah, and I think that when we actually, the other piece of that I want to add, which I think that was a great point. The other piece that I want to add to that is that the problem that I also see is that obviously we live in a time where data, information, statistics, we have access to all that, so we can prove our point if we want to. Whatever it is.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know, so when we engage in conversations, we no longer are willing to lose the conversation and say, I don't have all the picture, I don't have the full picture, I don't have all the information. No, we come into conversations we want to prove our point, even if we're wrong. Mm-hmm. We're not willing to admit that we're wrong, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that that's such a narcissistic and egocentric way of addressing conversations. Yeah. And that's literally how we address things, you know? I was telling Gabby, it's like, I'm always willing to come into a conversation, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If I don't have all the information, I don't have all the information.
Yeah.
How hard is for us to admit, you know, that I don't see the full picture because I haven't perhaps experienced my limited experience, you know, my the way I live life, whatever it is, you know. When we come into a conversation not willing to understand the other side and not willing to actually engage, not just to prove our point, perhaps we already lost the.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that makes living in 2020 so difficult is, I think, the way that we're now seeing more and more, like the way social media has now shifted and the way things are happening is, to me, I'm seeing more and more people become so triggered by any post or anything that might come out because of whether they, you know, if it's fake news or not. We don't know. You know, sometimes we're not sure and we're trying to figure it out. But people now are getting to the point where when you read one quote or you hear one thing, that boom, triggered anger, you know, lashing out, this you know, inability to listen to someone. And I think, to me, this is where my desire would be for those that, especially those that call themselves a believer and walk in that, is, you know, what is our call and into how we should live our life. First, I think we're acknowledging today that it's to bring peace, right? So clearly this world is set up in a way where the brokenness of our lives is, there's going to be conflict. Constant conflict. You talked about the way that we see it even in scripture in the Bible, where there's wars and how God interjects to bring peace, right? And I think nowadays in this modern day, we have the ability to be used by God to bring peace. And it may not be a war in the sense of fighting a physical battle, but it might be the wars that we're experiencing amongst the disconnect and just hatred amongst people, right? And so I think, to me, like you're mentioning, is that we're much more concerned with winning the argument or winning a debate than we are winning people over. And I think our number one desire should be, when we wake up in the morning, is every person that I interact with, whether it's on social media or in person, my desire would be that I would win them over and show them that there is a living God who loves them. But what we tend to do is, if I can only do that if they meet certain criteria, or if they voted the way that I'm going to vote. Because if they don't vote the way I'm going to vote, then we can't be friends. I can't invite you over to my house. There is no way I can serve you. Yep. And we think about this, is, to me, is like, well, what God are we saying that we believe in then?
Yeah.
Because if that's all it takes for us to disconnect ourselves from people, and I'm not saying be best friends with everyone, I'm not saying, you know, to that extreme, but I'm saying that if God is asking us and saying, hey, you are my followers, so represent me with every relationship that you have, that's a lot harder than I think we actually want to acknowledge, right?
Yeah, I think is yeah. And the reality of it is that for us, obviously, is so much easier, you know, to reject and to, you know, and to demonize people, you know, and the other side than actually to engage in the conversation.
Yeah.
Because, and this is so important, because I remember sitting down with people that they have certain ideas, you know, and different topics, that I sit down with them and I will ask them, explain to me what, and they were aware that I didn't agree with them.
Yeah.
And I remember I would ask them, explain to me, I let me understand it. And they will be frustrated. They will be upset, frustrated, irritated with me. And I'm like, I'm just asking you, help me understand.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
No, I said, you don't understand. I don't. Help me.
Yeah.
Right?
But they didn't want to explain it.
Right. So I think we also have to come into a place that if we actually believe what we believe, that we need to make sure that we have the ability to execute what we're trying to communicate, right? We can't just get frustrated with someone.
Yeah.
You know, if you, Joseph, don't believe that the Kanye West is the best rapper, you know, the GOAT, right? But I believe that Drake. I believe Drake. You're Kanye. I'm
we can't
Drake.
be friends.
Right? We can't be friends. No. Explain it to me.
Yeah.
And then you become frustrated, like, nah, but it's just you don't understand.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Don't explain it to me. Like, the reality is that we need to be willing to engage in the conversation.
Yeah.
And at the end, walk away being. I remember there was a one of my bosses. He was a president in the school, and he had such a great ability to bring conflict sometimes into the staff, conflict that we need to resolve. Yeah. But outside of that, he was very good at leaving that behind and engage in relationships. And I know as Latinos, we're very passionate, and it's very hard for us to do that, to disengage our emotions, you know, what just happened, to like, oh, let's keep moving forward, you know. But we need to learn how to handle and navigate our own feelings, you know, and take control over that and say, no, I can't actually do this. You know, I can be friends with someone that don't believe what I believe, that might disagree with me completely, perhaps it's not a demon.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I just want to kind of clarify for anyone who's listening to this conversation, like what you're going to hear from us is not us telling you what to think, how to think, how to make decisions on who to vote for, or if you're struggling with the racial tensions and things like that. This conversation for us is taking this to a deeper level when it comes to the desire to see peace in our world, because I think whether you are a believer or not, I think we all desire a peaceful place for us to live, right? We all desire that we could love each other well. I think there's a lot of fundamentals in our life that we can all agree on, that for the most part. And, you know, I've heard this from other people who are for sure not Christians say these things, that if you really break it down, most people are fundamentally good. Most people, that's why do you think our society works in a way it does for the most part, obviously, right? Where we can go to a grocery store and get our food, and you can trust that, you know, 90% of people are going to pay for the food that they bought. They're not going to try to steal. Like, yes, there are nuances and there's people that don't follow that, right? But if you think about the millions and billions of people on this earth, like, we have this tendency and desire to live in harmony and peace. But then there is, of course, the nuances of brokenness and the experiences that people have had that may cause them to live a certain way, to make certain decisions, right? And I think that there's this concept that I learned in a book that talked about the difference between looking at someone and seeing someone. And it's this idea of when you just look at someone and you don't know anything about them, it's a stranger, right? You're immediately response, and this is what we all do. We're easy to judge and to just make assumptions, stereotypes. That's where that comes in. Implicit bias, where we just assume if they're dressed a certain way, then they come from a certain neighborhood. If their car looks a certain way, then they're either wealthy or maybe they're in the, you know, poor neighborhoods. We can easily judge people based on their exterior and materialistic, right? But when we have the ability, this is what I think that we all need to come to a place of is coming to a place where when we're walking outside or we're scrolling through social media, instead of just looking at people, we need to start seeing people. And what seeing people means is seeing them the way that God created them, seeing them as God's creation.
Yes.
Because when we see them as God's creation, and when we see them as they are more than their opinion on something, they are more than just their post, that they are more than just what they drive, they are more than just where they live or don't live. And when we can start to see them in a different context and see them as a brother, we can see them as a sister, we can see them as someone who has value, because that's what we try to do. And I think that's what we start to fall prey on, is we try to strip away people's value so that we can judge them, so that we can hate them. And I think it's not and for us, no one wants to admit that they want to do that. It's not that people walk around saying, I want to hate people. They think they're doing good. They think that they're fighting for a cause that they believe in. But I think the problem is when we get so wrapped up in our cause, and this is why, to me, I believe, like, my faith is so strong, is that there is nothing else in this world that holds up the flag of, will you just love people? Don't tell me, and I don't care what your political party preference is. I don't care what your race is. I don't care where you came from. I know that I am called to love you and that you're called to love me. But that doesn't happen as well as it should, right? I mean, we have conflict, and conflict is okay. I think that's what, for as peacemakers, we come to this place. I know I struggle with that, because trust me, I wish this world was perfect. Conflict, I have to come to a place where conflict is okay. But the frustrating part of being a peacemaker is that God has called me to resolve some conflicts that I can. Not all of them, but the ones that I can.
Yeah, we need to embrace it. We need to embrace the tension that is in it, right? The tension between two different ideas, trying to bring it together. And I think that you're just tackle it correctly. I think that's the reason why, to me, this faith in Jesus is so valuable, because he holds people in a high standard. He holds human beings in a high standard, and he doesn't want to bring his relationship with you based on guilt or shame you, or fear, right? He also wants to raise you up and elevate you to the person he designed you to be, right? Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important. I think when we believe who Jesus is, right, he always elevates us who we are, and he always brings to surface maybe things are very dark, but not because not because he wants to let us know how bad we are, and perhaps but because he wants us to deal with it. There's a higher view of how can we be human beings here on earth, right? So at the end of the day, even for my friends that perhaps they don't believe in God, or they don't believe in Jesus, if we want to make our communities better, our families better, bringing peace is such an important thing. Because if we don't embrace that, if we are just careless, in the way we communicate, like, I don't care what they feel, they just have to know what I have to communicate, or what I have to say, right? Or we're not thoughtful in the way we might have to tackle something that might be tough and rough, right? That we just throw it raw, if that's our mentality, we're missing it, because we're gonna hurt people, and we're never gonna resolve anything, and we need to be intentional. If we write something in social media, if we put something on our podcast, if I'm having a conversation Thanksgiving with my family, be thoughtful, care, think about others, empathize with them. And that's the dangers of social media, right? We live in this place where I think the empathizing with people is diminished more and more, because we're not interacting with another human being. Everything is through the phone. So we no longer sometimes know how to have this empathy for someone's issues and brokenness and challenges, and inconsistencies.
And when I think about where most of our struggle, I think as humans, no matter who you are, I don't think you have to convince people that of their own selfishness, right? Of our own ability to choose ourselves over others, right? But my thing is, I had this image come into my mind. I was thinking of, have you ever seen like those big cranes that have like a big like wrecking ball and like destroy buildings? When you think about this wrecking ball versus like a building, right? Who wins that battle usually?
The wrecking ball, correct?
Right? Yeah. So and you know what happens with that wrecking ball is when it's destroying a building, do you think it like feels bad for the building? Like it doesn't care about the building, right? It's not like, apologetic when it's doing what it's doing, right? But the wrecking ball is wreaking havoc on that building and destroying the foundation of that building and completely diminishing that. So a lot of people are walking around like that wrecking ball. They're walking around into their relationships. They're posting. They're having direct messaging people, and they're doing it like a wrecking ball where all they're doing is attacking. All they're doing is making sure their presence is felt, making sure that, hey, as long as they know my opinion on this, then I can go in peace. And guess what? They're acting like the wrecking ball in the sense of they don't care what happens to that person. They don't care, to get to know that person. They don't care how long that building was alive for. That was a historic building. The wrecking ball doesn't care about that. All it cares about is destroying it and bring it to the ground. And that's how people treat those that they disagree with, treat those that when they're not concerned with peace. When they're not concerned with restoring, because you've seen some historic buildings being restored, right? So we go to different countries in Europe and we see these ruins and these places that have been restored, and they keep them up and they build them and they turn them into something else, and they turn them into a museum. And we see that people, even in their brokenness, even when they have gotten it wrong for 50 years, that they're able to be restored. And instead of us being that wrecking ball, we need to walk around as those peacemakers to bring restoration. And that is a challenge, and it's something that I think is probably one of the most difficult things, but it's also one of the most like such a blessing to be able to have the ability to do that.
Dude, man, there's so much in my mind right now. But and when we attack people, when we become this wrecking ball, we do it in the name of truth. All the time. We have to speak the truth. If you are someone who believes in Jesus, we have to speak the truth of the Bible. If you're not, we have to speak the truth of facts. Right? We always do it in the name of truth. And I have an issue with that because it's true. We need to communicate truth. I value truth. The problem is when I'm trying to communicate truth and I do it in the name of truth, and I'm trying to if I DM someone and say, I just don't agree with what you just said, my question to you will be, how many times do you interact with that person? Do you know what she does with her life, or what he does with his life? Do you know where he works, where she works? Do you know where is her hobbies? Do you know that person? Because if you know that person, you might have maybe the right to say something. But if you don't, and you just like bringing the statements, not knowing that person, like you have no right to do that, I believe Jesus always won the right to speak into someone's life, interacting with them, talking to them, embracing them. Even when with the Pharisees, like he interacted constantly with them, because he knew them. So I think we need to win. If we want to speak that and we want to do it in the name of truth, you need to build a relationship with that person first.
Definitely.
Instead of just throwing statements like that.
And it's funny because I'm thinking about a conversation I recently had with a coworker, and a lot of times when you're having a conversation over messaging, whether it's like on Google Messenger or whatever, and when you have intense conversations or very strong opinionated conversations, so much gets lost in those messages when you're just reading someone's comments, and even when you're trying to respond gracefully or you're trying to respond with all love and empathy, like a lot of times like that just does not go over well. Most of the conversations that happen online, people end friendships, people end family members getting all frustrated with each other because you're messaging people back and forth, but what I feel like gets lost, and you kind of mentioned it, was like that the lack of love and empathy. It's so hard to read that when you're having like really important conversations.
That's true.
And there's something different about having a face-to-face conversation where you're able to see the person's emotions, when you're able to see the person's reactions, when you're able to actually communicate and they can hear your tone. And it's funny because a lot of people like tend to disregard that, but tone and mood and the way that you approach conversations really does matter. So when you're talking about, hey, let me understand you, I don't get it, but I want to understand your perspective. It doesn't mean that I have to agree with you, but I need you to, we need to get to a place where we're willing to listen to each other. And I realize, I think that what's happening in our life right now is that people are much and more less interested in listening to each other. We don't want to listen. We want to speak. We want, especially because of social media, I feel like we have the boldness to, okay, I need to post something. I need a comment. I need my voice to be heard. And we feel this like anxiety about our voice being heard, that we're totally disregarding the desire and the effectiveness and what love comes out of saying, hey, when we talk, I'm going to listen to what you have to say. And maybe I'm not going to respond right away, but I want to actually give the space to, yes, your opinion and your perspective is valuable. It doesn't mean I have to agree or believe the exact same things, but we can choose to love each other well in how we listen, in how we communicate, and how we are actually engaging in conversations in a healthy way.
Yeah. Man, by far, this is my favorite conversation. I'll tell you that.
Really?
I love this conversation.
Oh, man.
This is my last thought. I close with this. I was reading my devotional.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book. And there's this moment in the life of the Israelites, and they're so devoted into reading the Torah, which is scripture, the truth of God. They're so devoted in fasting, abstaining themselves from food and other stuff, trying to keep the commandments of God, but they haven't taken care of justice. They haven't taken care of people. They become so obsessed of knowing something on someone that they don't take care of their relationship with others. And God addresses this with them, and he tells them this is the true fasting, and he starts letting them know, I need you to do this, I want you to do that, da, 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 da. He starts telling them. And I remember sending this verse to Gabby. I was like, I want to be known by this. And God tells him, if you do this, you're going to be known by this. And it's in Isaiah chapter 58 verse 12. It says, your people will rebuild the ancient ruins, and I will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairers of the broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. And I want to be known by that. I want to be known by restoring things, bringing life into places.
That's so good.
And bringing life into communities, into my family. I want to be known by someone that brings reconciliation and not separation. And I don't believe I would put the truth of God in jeopardy, because I don't think that I believe that he longs for restoration as much as he wants for them to know the truth. So I want to be known by that.
Yeah, I love it, man. That's awesome. My last thought is, I just want to encourage people, please open your eyes to what is really going on in this world. I believe that the one of the greatest tools of the enemy and how he uses us is division and the ability to divide us. And to me, when I think about politics and I think about what's going on, the thing that comes to mind to me, number one, is that even the idea of a two-party system to me is like, you realize that all this is doing is dividing us. All it's doing is giving us permission to pick a side. And so when we pick a side, that means we have enemies. But what does God say about our enemies? He says to love our enemies. And to me, I always think about that verse because I think about how many times we get frustrated with people, and even people that we like or dislike. What always comes to my mind is God still asks you to love them. And so to me, I think I would just like, my encouragement is like, if you're listening to this podcast, is just have that check with yourself and really think about the decisions that you're making, the way that you engage with people, and ask yourself that question: Are you bringing peace, or are you just contributing to the division? Because to me, division is something that it hurts so much deeper than we realize. It doesn't bring communities together. Why do you think we're all working towards these types of things of bringing people together, making sure that we can all live a fruitful life? But yet we're so easily swayed to make decisions that cause division. And to me, it's sad. Honestly, it really is. Yep. And my desire is that we would see peace.
Yep. And I believe that.
So, hey, listen, if you're listening to this podcast, we want to ask you guys to engage in these conversations. And even if you have just random questions for us, like, feel free to shoot Antonio a DM, feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram, and just engage with us. If you guys have questions that you want us to address, we actually want to try to start addressing these questions on the podcast. Yes. So we would love to do that, engage with you guys. So send us a DM if you have questions that you want us to hear answer, any of our opinions on things that we can give. We would love to do that. So yeah, man, I think that was great, man. I think I enjoy getting into this and this conversation and just going all in.
All right, fam. See you.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
My eyes open, no longer am I asleep. I got peace inside my heart over the scars that used to be. Cut up in pieces, the knife is still in my pocket. Now I use it for the freedom, cutting down